When most people picture a gaming console, they think of a chunky black box under the TV with a dedicated power brick, a stack of physical discs, and a controller that costs $70 on its own. The Apple TV 4K has never really fit that picture. It's always been thought of as a streaming device first, with gaming treated as a minor bonus feature buried somewhere in the App Store. But if the rumors circling the new Apple TV 4K hold up, that reputation might finally be due for a rewrite. Between a major chip upgrade, wireless controller support, and a rapidly maturing Apple Arcade library, the pieces are quietly falling into place for the Apple TV to become a legitimate, if understated, gaming device. To understand why this matters now and not 5 years ago, you have to look at where the Apple TV has been stuck. The current third-generation Apple TV 4K runs on the A15 Bionic chip, the same processor Apple first used in the iPhone 13 back in 2021. That chip was never designed with serious gaming performance in mind. It can handle lightweight, stylized Apple Arcade titles just fine, but anything approaching console-style graphics, real-time lighting, complex physics, dense open environments has always been out of reach. That's a big part of why gaming on Apple TV has felt more like a curiosity than a real feature. You could play something, but you were never going to mistake it for a proper gaming session. That's where the rumored chip upgrade changes the math. Multiple credible reports point to Apple moving the new Apple TV 4K up to the A17 Pro, the chip that debuted in the iPhone 15 Pro lineup. The jump from A15 to A17 Pro isn't a small refinement. It represents a meaningful leap in both CPU and GPU performance, along with a more capable neural engine. On a streaming box, most of that extra power doesn't actually get used for video playback, since even budget streaming sticks handle 4K HDR content without breaking a sweat. But for gaming, that headroom matters enormously. A 17 Pro class graphics performance opens the door to significantly more ambitious visuals, better lighting, more detailed character models, smoother frame rates, and the kind of graphical fidelity that starts to genuinely resemble what you'd expect from a low to mid-tier dedicated console, rather than a mobile game running on a TV screen. This is also where Apple's broader chip strategy starts to look pretty deliberate. Apple has spent years pushing its A-series and M-series chips toward increasingly desktop-class graphics performance, largely driven by iPhone and iPad demands. The Apple TV, historically, has always lagged a generation or two behind because Apple never felt pressure to prioritize gaming performance in a device most people primarily use to watch TV. Putting a chip as capable as the A17 Pro into a $99 to $150 streaming box is a signal that Apple is finally willing to let the Apple TV benefit from silicon originally developed for its flagship phones, rather than treating it as an afterthought in the lineup. Raw graphics power is only half the equation, though. A console experience also depends heavily on input, and this is where controller support becomes the second major piece of the story. The Apple TV has technically supported Bluetooth game controllers for years. You can already pair a PlayStation DualShock or Xbox controller with the current model and play a decent chunk of the Apple Arcade library that way. But that support has always felt more like a workaround than a core part of the experience, since so few Apple Arcade titles were built with a full console-style control scheme in mind from the start. As the new chip opens the door to more graphically demanding, more mechanically complex games, expect Apple to lean harder into positioning controller support as a first-class feature rather than a hidden option buried in the settings menu. That shift matters because it changes the kind of games developers are willing to build for the platform. Game studios generally don't invest heavily in complex control schemes for a device that most of its audience is going to interact with using a small touch-sensitive remote. But if Apple starts actively marketing the Apple TV as controller-friendly, with hardware that can actually push more demanding visuals, that creates a much stronger incentive for developers to build deeper, more traditional games specifically with the platform in mind, rather than porting over simplified mobile titles as an afterthought. So, how does this actually compare to a real entry-level console? It's worth being realistic here, rather than overselling it. The Apple TV 4K isn't going to be running the latest AAA blockbuster at ultra settings, and it's extremely unlikely Apple positions it as a direct competitor to something like a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X. Those consoles are built around dedicated high-wattage GPUs specifically engineered for sustained gaming performance, With cooling systems and power budgets, a small streaming box simply isn't designed to match. But the more interesting comparison isn't against flagship consoles. It's against entry-level and budget gaming hardware, along with cloud gaming devices. Against something like a Nintendo Switch in handheld mode, or budget Android-based gaming boxes. An A17 Pro powered Apple TV running well-optimized Apple Arcade titles starts to look genuinely competitive, especially once you factor in Apple's tight hardware-software integration, which tends to squeeze more real-world performance out of a chip than raw benchmark numbers alone would suggest. There's also a cost angle that's easy to overlook. If the rumored sub-$100 pricing for the new Apple TV 4K turns out to be accurate, that positions it well below the cost of even a base PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series S, let alone a gaming PC. For a family that already owns Apple devices and already has a TV in the living room, the idea